Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. Now, are you ready for the first ever premium medium tank with a turbocharger? This is the CS-52C and it comes out today available for gold. That's right, you can actually purchase this thing without having to open up like about 50 or 100 loot boxes or be able to actually spend your money rather than currency that you purchased inside the game. I think it's available for like 8,600 gold, so that makes it quite an attractive prospect for a variety of players. However, a lot of you will be thinking, oh, if it's available for gold, it can't be very good. Well, that's what I'm here to try and break down for you today. The CS-52C is ridiculously fast. With a turbo, this thing's going at 75 kilometers an hour, weighs 40 tons, and so you put one and one together about what that can be able to achieve. This is a tank for those of you who want to just be fast, aggressive, but also have a little bit of armor to be able to back it up rather than playing a light tank, as well as have a decent amount of hit points to take a few hits to be able to make those powerful plays. So sit back and relax while I get sweaty, driving around at breakneck speed, trying to let you know whether the CS-52C is worth it. So how does the first turbocharging premium medium hold up compared to some of its competition? Well, when you're kind of like the first in class, it's really hard to find vehicles that compare to it directly, but I think its brother, the CS-52 Lease, and also the Kampfpanzer 07RH are probably the best vehicles to do so. So I've added in two CS-52Cs here so that you can see a one on the left if it's not inside the speed mode, and two if it's using that turbo. So immediately we notice that this vehicle's gun performance, it is very lackluster. 1,800 damage per minute is 2012, whereas we are 12 years later. Its penetration of 208 doesn't look too bad compared to the CS-52 Lease and also the Kampfpanzer, but when you take into account that the CS-52 Lease hits for 320 instead of 250, that makes this thing feel awful. Now, you might go and say, oh, but the Kampfpanzer has 200, so the 250 is better than that, right? But the issue is that the Kampfpanzer has 2,400 damage per minute, so while it has that low alpha damage, it manages to make up for it. The CS-52C kind of feels as if it's a tank that while it can rush into position, when it's there, it just doesn't really have the firepower. However, one really interesting thing about this tank is that the high explosive rounds have 410 alpha damage up from 250. That's bizarre because the Kampfpanzer increases to 320 from 200, and if we look at the Lease, it goes from 320 up to 420, only 100 damage increase. So this means that when you use HE shells on the CS-52C, that the damage per minute jumps over those two vehicles and becomes ridiculously high. So if you can penetrate HE shells, this will work wonders for you and you'll pretty much double your damage per minute, which is very nice against artillery and soft armored targets. One thing to mention about this vehicle is it does get pretty good gold rounds. 270 millimeters of heat pen, and I'd rather have heat honestly than APCR so that I can use that against over angled tanks, or should I say tanks that aren't angling too much, because remember, heat will go up to 85 degrees of angled armor as long as the plate that it's hitting is not the thickest. One thing that is nice, however, is the shell velocity on these standard armor-piercing rounds is actually really good at 1,100. So while you are lacking compared to that APCR with that 1,500 on the Lease, at least you've still got some fairly good sniping potential with your standard rounds. So now let's talk about the gun handling on this vehicle. 2.5 seconds aim time outside of the turbo, 3.5 inside the turbo. That's not good news either way, right? Way worse than the Lease with its higher alpha and to like double that of the Kampfpanzer. This thing does feel as if it takes a long time to aim in. When you add to this poor accuracy of 0.39 and not the best gun handling, horrible turret traverse dispersion, so make sure you take snapshot on this tank. Movement dispersion, not so bad, but look at what happens when you enter the speed mode. 0.45, 0.45 and 0.3, that's more like you're playing an FV4 005. And the problem is with this tank is, as you're going to see, it has quite a lot of pressure on its equipment slots, so you don't really want to be using vert stabs outside of the speed mode, but when you're in, kind of feels like you want to. Gun depression wise, 7 degrees is the same as the Lease. It's thoroughly mediocre for a tier 8 medium and pales compared to the Kampfpanzer's 9. So now onto the mobility of this vehicle, and this is where it should be absolutely amazing news because it has a turbocharger and it's the new fastest premium medium, right? Well, yes and no. 50 forwards and 17 backwards is not great. It's actually much slower than the Lease when you take into account its poor power to weight ratio outside of the speed mode, and its horrible ground resistances that Wargaming have given it, which makes it feel really sluggish when you're not using the speed mode. However, when you do use the speed mode, your top speed increases to 70 forwards and 25 backwards with 28 power to weight, and that feels fantastic. However, let me clarify that while your power to weight is great, your ground resistances don't get better, and so compared to the Kampfpanzer, it actually feels like it's slower in some situations upslope on medium and can barely do better on soft terrain than the Kampfpanzer. And remember, the Kampfpanzer can still shoot its opponents while it's traveling along at 65 compared to the CS-52C, which it's really not. So now onto the armor of this vehicle. Is it good news? Well, it looks like it's got an amazing turret, right? 260. But when we actually go and take a look at this thing's turret armor, oh dear. This is what 208 millimeters of pen does to it. It just trashes it. The whole of the left and the right of the turret, and even if you're using your gun depression, it doesn't really get that much better. The only really good part of this is the mantlet. It's 300 and 260 down the side, and you can get some funky ricochets off the upper part. So the turret, it's good, but I feel like the CS-52 Lisa's turret is just as good, if not better. Now, it is way better than the Kampfpanzer, but when we take a look at the hull armor that this thing has, oh, it's awful. Even if you're angling like this, that upper hull never really becomes a ricochet until here. You've also got a driver's hatch, which is flatter, which is always pennable, even when it's using its maximum gun depression. Its side armor is decent at 60, but it has this awful wing that kind of like flaps over. And the upper part of here is 30 millimeters, so it gets overmatched and trashed by artillery. And the lower plate is horrendous as well. This thing is a glass cannon of glass cannons. It can take HE shells, and it might bounce the occasional tier 6 tank, but really, its armor is not great. I would still sit in front of pretty much everything that wasn't kind of like a tier 9 firing gold or a tier 10 when I'm playing this vehicle if I'm in a hold down position, but I wouldn't really rely on the armor to get you through too many scenarios. One thing that is good is its hit points are not bad, a little bit better than the Lys, but the same as the Kampfpanzer. But now onto one of the best aspects of the vehicle, and that is the camo rating. Now let me clarify, the camo rating outside of the speed mode. You'll see that the camo rating goes from 17.5 when stationary down to 11 when you're stationary outside of the speed mode. So you basically go from being a really sneaky tank to not a sneaky tank. And when you look at the movement camo, 13 on the move compared to less than 9 when you're inside the turbo. So this means that when you're playing on like Malinovka and you're playing on Prokhorovka, I would thoroughly recommend that you consider not using the speed mode when you're trying to sneak through in some bushes, or even if you're trying to make a flanking play where you need to be sneaky but not fast, then don't use the speed mode and you might not even get spotted and slip in the first place. This makes even the fairly good camo on the Lys and the Kampfpanzer look really bad in this comparison. And if we actually go and take a look at tanks by stat, you will notice that this vehicle actually has, I have to click there once to actually gain access to the moving camo. You'll notice that this vehicle actually has one of the best moving camos in the game for tier 8 mediums, with the only better tanks being the Miel or the Borask and the Object 416, but only just a little bit better. It's better than the UDES, the STG, the Guard, the T-34-2, the regular CS-53. This is a very sneaky medium, and you can play it like an efficient scout. However, unfortunately, the vehicle has poor view range, with only 380 meters view range, which really sucks. And it means that unless you use a Bond vents on this tank, you will be forced to use coated optics, even if you're using a premium consumable. Luckily, the CS-52C will use the same crew that you're used to on your high-tier Polish tanks. So if you've got yourself a CS-63 or you've got yourself the new Hurricane, then you'll be right at home in training up your crew for both of the CS-52s. Crew skills wise, I would recommend on your commander that you have situational awareness and recon to improve that horrible camo rating. Of course, brothers in arms, concealment, repairs on this tank, then things like Eagle Eye. Everything else is optional. For the gunner, I'd recommend brothers in arms, concealment, repairs, designated target, Deadeye to a degree, but I think probably getting snapshot before that would be very important on this tank. Driver skills wise, really high pressure slot. Make sure you've got a 0 skill driver for this tank. You must have brothers. You must have, in my opinion, controlled impact for what I'm going to be showing you. I think I would almost take that rather than repairs or concealment on this tank, and you'll see why. The concealment on this tank, repairs on this vehicle, off-road driving to improve those horrible ground resistances, and that's without taking like things like smooth ride to be able to make this vehicle actually be able to shoot a little bit better on the move. Your loader, very low pressure slot on this tank. I'll take brothers, repairs, concealment, then I'd focus on intuition so you can quickly switch out to those HE shells, and then things like safe stowage and adrenaline rush. and then eventually finish with firefighting. Equipment-wise on this tank, I'm going to have 2 builds. One of them is going to be turbo, vents, and a gun rammer. Now, this is going to give me, with full crew skills, just about enough view range to actually manage 439. This is a tank that I will be putting bond vents on outside the slot so that I can be able to get to at least 444. But remember, this is with every crew skill and with a premium consumable, so you might want to use coated optics on this vehicle if you really care about your long view range, especially considering the rate of fire isn't the speciality. For my second build on this tank, I'm going full scout. I'm going to go with vents, vision system, and exhaust, but considering how poor the view range on this tank is, if you're so inclined, you might want to drop the vents to instead go and take coated optics to pump your view range up to work with that vision system. And when you do this, even without fancy bounty equipment, you can get an obscene 38% camo while you're moving outside of the speed mode. That's crazy. This is such a sneaky tank to also be quite quick and to have at least a reasonable amount of armor when you get there. Field mods wise on this tank, I would thoroughly recommend taking the module durability increase, so if you get ammo racked, you can still fight back. Then I would recommend taking accuracy. Finally, I would recommend taking the concealment on this tank, so you can really try to maximize that. But be warned that if you do that, that does make your reverse speed outside of the speed mode quite lackluster at 15. And for the bonus slot, I would take scouting so that you can improve your commander's vision system, and also when you're using the turbo vents gun rammer build to boost up those vents. But I think that's quite enough talking. Let's take this monster fast tank out onto the battlefield. All right, so here we go. We're rolling out in our first game on Rumbergen. Where are we going to go? Well, that's the big decision about when you're playing a fast tank like the CS-52C, is there's so many opportunities for where you can go. I feel like this tank needs a good amount of experience, a good amount of confidence, and willing to be able to risk it for the biscuit, right? To decide about where you're going to be taking your CS-52C. Quite often you can end up actually bullying medium tanks that were thinking about going in here to actually then take that early position. Even with safe stowage, I got ammo rack there, which is a little bit brutal. And take a look at this gun handle right now. It's not exactly great. And this is interesting. We have a CS-52 lease and a CS-52C. And he managed to get into this position as well. Although, here's the interesting thing. It may be if I didn't go here with my speed, the enemy team might have gone here. And then the slower tank, like the CS-52 lease, might have had to fight multiple vehicles inside this position, you know? So maybe by me coming here with the faster version of the CS-52, it allowed the slower version to get here as well. Now, I'd rather be in that tank than this tank, that's for sure. I'd rather have that better accuracy. I'd rather have that better alpha damage. And honestly, I'd rather have the APCR rounds for the extra shell velocity, where you can almost just auto-aim and just hold down the mouse button. But it is quite interesting to see these two Polish Tier 8 premium brothers just alongside each other. But I do like the standard rounds on this tank, at least when I'm shooting at soft targets, right? The shell velocity is not bad. We can hit our shells, well, at least we can hit most of our shells, as the TVP seems to avoid that one. And the view range with vents, it's definitely not the best, but it's not the worst as well, as we are picking up some view range on the AMBT. So I have a little bit of a look behind me there to see if that 7032 is planning. And what I want to highlight now is that what this tank does is it rushes, it takes an early position, and if it wins it, it doesn't really have that much fun when it gets there. Sure, it can be able to get some shots at tourist Jag Panther 2s who are just making their way through the center of Runeberg. Maybe they're looking for the Bratwurst store. Yeah, is there a sausage shop? There probably is. I think Germany probably has just dedicated sausage shops. I know that once you go further east into like the Slavic countries, that they do have entire aisles of supermarkets purely dedicated to kielbasa, or sausages, right? Having spent a lot of time in Belarus, the amount of aisles that are literally just dedicated to sausages and alcoholic beverages are very impressive. Long live the Slav diet, although maybe possibly you aren't going to live too long, but maybe happy. But maybe I'm just trying to fill time here while you will get to see the experience of this tank. And that is that its armor doesn't really hold up that well. Sure, it doesn't help when you get new ventilations installed in the back of your turret from high explosive anti-tank rounds, But the front of this vehicle, it just doesn't feel great. It really doesn't. Even if you're sitting in a hold down position and you're trying to use your 7 degrees of gun depression and you're trying to make the best of it, it doesn't feel like a tank that has the durability once it's in a position. In all the games that I played in this tank, I managed to take that early position, but I do feel that when I'm there, I never felt like I was truly safe. It felt as if I suffered. I felt as if the pain just happened. And then it's like, now what? Okay, I'm in this position. I can't really advance out. I can't use my speed. I have good camo, but if I use my speed mode, I don't have good camo. So I... bouncing off a Borask turret, although it's most likely I hit their gun. And I feel very awkward in this tank if I don't get into a position where opportunities are just given to me, right? Where you don't get those clean lines of fire. So we're going to leave it. Go and see if we can spot this TVP. Maybe I can proxy spot the TVP, light them up for the tank destroyer that we can see over towards the east, the AMX-CDA. And you just pray now that the Scorpion doesn't find me, or that some tank like the 703-122 who put a round in the back of my turret has now decided to advance over to that corner. So I'm asking my friends for help, hoping that they're going to push down the east, hoping that they're going to get some crossfire in, hoping that maybe the LT-432 will help me. Although realistically the LT-432 is going to spot for themselves, and so they do spot for themselves, then I'm not going to be able to get the spotting. But oh wow, the LT's actually not spotting. So that forces the TVP out. The TVP just wants to destroy me. Great. Tunnel visions for the CS-52 Lease and the Borask. But okay, I don't really get that much spotting from the situation, but at least I get the vehicle taken care of. So this was just really my experience with this tank. You can take the early positions. Sometimes that allows you to be very dominant. Sometimes it allows your team to win without you winning, right? Without you getting the farm. Without you kind of getting the spotting as well with the poor view range on this vehicle. Although, again, if you're inclined, you can drop the vents to be able to use something like coated optics if you want to have a little bit of view range. But remember, if you drop those vents, then other areas of the tank, like this pineapple reticle on your screen, get even bigger. And while I might want to try and find the biggest pineapple in a supermarket, I'm not in a supermarket here. I'm in blooming World of Tanks. And all my speed, all of my momentum... Oh, I actually managed to block a shell. Well, one shell. I blocked one shell there. After the T-32 just whacks me right in the turret. So I wanted to show this game. Look, it's an awful result right there. What did we get? Like 2,300, 2,400 combined. It's not a great game of World of Tanks. But the CS-52C seems to win games just with its positional plays and taking those early positions. You deny those positions to the light tanks. You deny those positions to the lighter mediums that usually take them, like the Borask on the enemy team, who look like they wanted to slinky into the center, or the Saladin, those kind of vehicles. You deny those positions to the enemy team, and while you're not very good when you're there, just that area denial, the impact on your team's likelihood to win cannot be understated. We've seen that with a tank like the CS-63, and I think we're going to see that with this vehicle as well. But let me clarify all in all that this vehicle, it doesn't really hold up like a CS-63 when it comes to the firepower, the combat, and even arguably most of the armor. So now we enter Chapter 2. I want to show you that the CS-52C brings brand new capabilities for any of you out there who are a little bit wild like me. You know my silliness when I play something like a Charles 75. You know my silliness when I play something like an E50M. Well, this vehicle is kind of as fast as a Charles 75. It has arguably better armor than a Charles 75, and it weighs 40 tons. So, do the math here. What do you think happens when a tank that can kind of drive at 70-75 kilometers an hour, it weighs 40 tons, collides with a tank that does not? Well, how about this? We have an ELC even 90. Yeah, what do you think happens? Boop. Yeah. That was 558 ramming damage on the even 90, and the cockroach is down before the game has even begun. We managed to hit them on the move, which is miraculous considering we were in the speed mode there. And the ELC also burnt to death while being rammed. If that is not a good metal experience for our Polish tank, then I don't know what is. A passing mention should be made that I didn't actually talk about the slight difference that this tank has on the speed mode. And you can see it in the center of your screen now. But it actually takes 1.5 seconds to leave the speed mode, but it takes 2.5 seconds to enter the speed mode. Now this is important because it means that the tank's actually quite quick to race into position and then to leave the speed mode, and then 1.5 seconds later it's starting aiming and it's managed to engage its opponents. However, it also means that when you get caught out and you think like, oh, I just want to switch into the speed mode and I can be able to race away, it's actually really slow. Whereas it's the other way round for the Char 75. With the Char 75, I believe it's like a second or something for it to be able to enter the speed mode, but a long time to be able to leave the speed mode and to be able to get its firepower going. But this is just CS-52 C things, right? We're just going to pilot down this slope, and we're going to use our speed and our agility to avoid the damage. There are practically no other tanks that could be able to do this with regards to mediums. And for this thing to have the speed, instead of its armor, to be able to get into position, that's great. Unfortunately for me, this turtle is going to focus me here. I'm going to try and slinky on. And outside of the speed mode, I'm suddenly not very fast. And even though I felt like I avoided that turtle shell, I sure didn't. And while I dug out a very hard to deal with tank, and I'm getting spotting on all of the other vehicles, I lost my hit points. And yeah, the ultimate French cockroach manages to come after us. So this was just kind of one of the best examples of the CS-52C that you can have. You have that ridiculous excitement from getting that literal full health ram kill on a light tank. You can bully them. And you have the crazy speed to be able to avoid fire, to be able to get into position. But when you're there, your armor doesn't hold up. We blocked 0 damage. And while we ended up with like 4,400 combined in this battle, which is a great game in a sub 3-minute round, and we'll make a lot of credits from this as it is a premium tank, it just doesn't seem to have the firepower or the mobility or even the armor once it's done its flashy play to be able to kind of get away with it. And I do think that this tank is going to become a little bit of a meme in itself, that it's going to allow a lot of players to do a lot of things that they pretty much previously couldn't do. And honestly, I think this could be a really fun tank for just blowing off a little bit of steam and just saying, sod it, we're going to just have a go and see if we can get lucky, or see if we can just create a little bit of chaos. And it almost feels as if this tank, because of its capacity to ram, if you can manage to connect the rams, is way more fun to make plays, like crazy plays like this. I'm trying to limit test this vehicle and just see what it's capable of. And we're just going to go in on this assault map and see if we can win this flank. And while we got rid of the ELC cockroach, just look what this thing also does to wheeled vehicles. And it's nimble enough. Oh, okay, there's a full health tank gone. Lost our ammo rack on the very first shot. We managed to avoid some shells from the 1357. And unfortunately, I can't quite get the Boras. We've got horrible gun handling. So we have to leave the speed mode here to be able to actually deal with our opponents. We're ammo racked once again, even though we've only taken like about 4 shots this game. And we died to an IS-3. So this vehicle, I honestly think the memes are coming. There'll be CS-52Cs who play horrendously. It is not going to be a good time to be a light tank when there's a whole host of these bombing it about. You should respect this tank's capacity to ram. I think this tank's ramming capability is like the most powerful thing about it. You can literally one-shot entire light tanks if you manage to get that consistent hit. And because of its agility, it's hard for them to even be able to avoid the ram in the first place. But man, does this thing get ammo racked a lot. So now we're playing on El Haloof, and I've used my speed to be able to make it into position. I lit up the 48, but nobody managed to be able to deal with that. Now we're in position using that speed. We're going to go on the offensive. I'm actually going to very much enjoy playing this tank just for, I don't care, aggression. I probably will play this vehicle just for fun. I won't really care too much. Obviously, I'm going to try my best to win the game, but I feel like I'm definitely going to take more risks than I probably should do in this vehicle, because I think it's capable of some crazy things. And I think that there's no point in this vehicle unless you do play it in a crazy way. What I want to show here now is just how good these high explosive rounds are. Mad, right? 390 damage. That's not even a high roll. Instead of 250 AP, the damage per minute on this tank goes from like worst in class to one of the best in class for it. But ladies and gents, I want to show you that when I said that this thing gets ammo racked a lot, I am not kidding you. I got ammo racked so much in this tank. And let me clarify, that is with safe stowage. That is with a premium consumable. that is with Brothers in Arms. This thing gets ammo racked all day long, and that looks like that's just caught, but maybe that's overmatched that upper hull armor, or maybe it's just caught it at an angle. Doesn't really matter. This thing feels as if it's just a walking ammo rack for your opponents. So much so that I would recommend maybe using the safe stowage directive once you've got your safe stowage to 100%, just so you can avoid some of those ammo racks in the first place, because this thing goes popped. This thing is almost the definition of live fast, die young, and leave a beautiful corpse. It's just, in World of Tanks, sometimes it's nice to make it to the end of the battle. So all in all, I want to come to my conclusion about this tank, but firstly I want to highlight I used my wrong build. And also, I will fully admit, in all of the gameplay that you saw here, I took the wrong field mod. I played all of these battles late last night after like a 12-hour stream. I think I was very tired, and all of the games that you're seeing today, I'm going to be using the field mod that actually improved my reverse speed and lowered my camo. So if I do get spotted here, there's two faults. Number one, I'm not using the exhaust. I would definitely take an exhaust to be able to make my way down this front and have the vision system to be able to work these bushes better. And secondly, I've got 6% worse camo than I otherwise would have if I would have taken the correct build that I recommended to you in the equipment part of this video. So, the CS-52C. I want to come to the conclusion while we're having the gameplay here. Do I think this is an incredibly overpowered tank that's going to be an absolute monster? No, I really don't think it's an incredibly overpowered tank that's going to be an absolute monster in World of Tanks. Do I think that it's a very fun tank to play? Bit of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of vibe with this vehicle. Sure, it's so fun when getting into that position creates a result. Or it's so fun when you go in and ram something until you get ammo racked. Or until you realize, darn, I really don't actually have any firepower while I'm here. I don't think I would have got spotted if I'd had my correct build here. But look, we're actually just going to slinky out and just pray to the Polish gods that we're going to be able to make this. And I can't believe we actually did. And actually, we light up all of those vehicles at the back. If I'd had my correct build, I don't think I would have been spotted, and I would have been able to show you the true camo potential of this vehicle. And I'd recommend tune into my stream this Friday. I will be, if you're sitting on the fence still, and I'll play a lot of this tank. I'll probably play it like 20, 30 times. And you'll get to see all of the ins and outs if you're looking to be able to make the final decision if the gold is important to you. But I digress, back to what I was saying. And that is that once the vehicle has kind of got into that position, it just doesn't really have the firepower, doesn't have that extreme nature to be able to perform there. And so it's crazy, it's fun, but it's not fun. It's balanced. I think it's balanced. I really don't think this thing is going to be OP. I think if anything, this vehicle will be horrible for a lot of players. A lot of players will get this. They won't know the positions they're meant to go into. They won't know the positions they're meant to contest. And they're going to have horrendous results in this tank. I think statistically, this vehicle's win ratio should be average or below average for the vast majority of players, but I think there will be exceptional players who do know how to use this tank's capabilities, and they will know all of the positions they need to use the speed to progress into, and those players will do really well in this vehicle. They're going to cry that they don't have the firepower when they're there, but the fact that they can get there and to make plays that other tanks can only dream of, that's a strength in itself. This vehicle is not for those of you who want to have a consistent tank or are not willing to take a few risks, but if you think that you're a bit of a crazy player, I think this could be the tank for you. And I think that Wargaming are making it available for like 8,000 odd gold is fantastic. You don't have to use loot boxes to be able to have a chance of getting this tank. It's just available in-game for gold, and so Wargaming, for you, massive thumbs up for that. And so, I don't know, I'm not here to like shill, I can't believe it, but I'm almost hoping that this tank does well with regards to sales in-game for gold, because maybe then Wargaming will do more tanks like this that go into the game that are honestly, for me, and I'm a bit crazy, a lot of fun that we don't see inside loot boxes. I really like it. So I feel like this is a win-win for the community. I feel like it's another premium Polish medium that goes into the game that I screw up and I let the Centurion hit me. It's another Polish premium medium, sure. Not bad game, by the way. 4,600 combined, not too bad. This is another Polish medium. I still think the CS-52 Lease is better for the majority of players. And I think the CS-52 Lease is probably the more competitive tank throughout. But this one, when it gets away with it, boy, is this thing just a whole different can of worms that you can play. And as somebody who loves the Char-75, this kind of feels a bit like a Char-75 at tier 8, but it just doesn't have the fun autoloader. So all in all, the final word, crazy tank, crazy capabilities, will do well for crazy players who maybe don't care if they don't do amazingly in the battle, as long as they had fun for the part of the battle that they participated in. Thumbs up to Wargaming for the way that they've released it, even though statistically I think it might be just a little bit underpowered, and I'm certainly looking forward to getting my hands on it and playing it on stream this Friday. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this full tank review on the CS-52C and I helped you make an informed decision. If I did and you liked this, then make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the CS-52C in the comments down below. Do you think it looks amazing fun? Do you think it looks absolutely trash? What do you think about the fact that there's actually a brand new tank with a pretty cool new turbocharger that's available for in-game for gold and not actually inside loot boxes? Does that make you more inclined that you might give this thing a go and have a little bit of fun with it? Or would you prefer loot boxes in the future? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.